Hey y'all, welcome to my shop. Today I want to show you how to rough turn a bowl. We're going to use a piece of fresh green chestnut a friend of mine gave me. He said it was American chestnut. It might be, but my understanding is virtually all American chestnut in its normal habitat, which goes up northern states all the way down through Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, died out in the early 20th century due to a blight. Prior to that, prior to losing 3 to 4 million trees, it was one of the most common trees around. I understand 25 to 30% of our trees were the chestnut. I've only turned it a little bit. It's a very nice cutting wood, cuts like butter. It's got a very prominent grain. It's a fast growing tree. It's very nice. Before we get started, I want to take a moment, and kind of dress my tool rest. When you got a cast iron tool rest, sometimes it pays to take a file and just kind of dress it a little bit. Just pull it a few strokes to you, and that'll take care of that. And it doesn't hurt to, rub it occasionally with a little bit of paraffin, which I keep handy. Okay, let's get started. Okay, we're going to bandsaw this bowl blank out of chestnut. I've already cut the bottom off flat with a chainsaw, so it'll support this. I'm using my little short birdcage awl with a little thin template. This is faster and easier than using a screw or a nail. And let's get started. Because of the prominent grain, I've tried to draw a line on each side all the way around to square up the center ring in order to balance those rings, because they're so prominent in this chestnut. Using a two-pronged spur drive, I'm going I mark the center, and I'm going to use my weighted mallet. And these blades are running with the grain, not against the grain, or they wouldn't embed. And just simply now I can just simply mount this. Now I've marked the center initially where I think the grain will line up, and I'm not too concerned about this as much as I am the pattern of the grain. And we'll rough it a little bit and then compare the growth rings. Okay, with a freshly sharpened swept back 5/8 inch bar thickness, 1/2 inch British, we're going to just start rounding off the corner. This is pretty out of balance, so we're going to go very slow. We're just going to step aside, turn the lathe up a little bit. This is about a 9-inch blank, so I don't want to go more than about 600 or so to start with that. Dialing it up until I get a little out of balance wobble. Okay, it's beginning to wobble a little bit, so let's go ahead and I'm going to step out of the line of fire. Now it's clearing the tool rest, so I can go ahead and get closer support. You see this little lip here? It's going to take a little bit to get this rounded. You can go ahead and adjust the tool rest again. Notice because of this irregular edge, I'm pivoting out. And I've eliminated that lip. Now it's time to start looking at this grain again, see if I've got it oriented. So I'm looking at these rings. I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right about here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they're close. Okay. So I need to pivot this just a little bit this way because it's just a bit off, so I'm only going to pivot it about halfway based on, not going to affect the spur drive. I'm just going to move it maybe 1/4 of an inch. Adjust the tool rest. Take another pass. Now, it may look like I'm pulling with my left hand, but I'm only pushing down on the tool rest, and I'm using my body to do this a push cut. So now let's check that grain alignment again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There it is. And it's just about on the money. I'm going to use a large set of jaws, so I'm going to spot check how big that tenon needs to be. I'm going to switch to a detail gouge to get that nice clean shoulder here. Raise this up a little bit since the gouge is 3/8 inch and that other was 5/8. I've got to adjust the tool rest so I can cut on center. This is the bevel. It's going to go straight in. got a nice clean shoulder here with a very slight dovetail. Now I can refine that shape just a little bit. Okay, I've reversed the bowl in the chuck, and notice I have the slot between these jaws coming right up through the middle of the grain. This is probably a better look. Here's the actually, this is the orientation of the tree. So I've got these jaws straddling, so with even tension on both sides, as opposed to just putting it anywhere. Notice how smooth the jaws fit along here with no gaps, and that's critical so you don't get any vibration or movement, and you get your most secure hole. You should not be able to slide a piece of paper in between the jaws and the bowl. Because of the uneven face, I'm going to go ahead and smooth this down a little bit and bring in just a slight concave to make it easier for a drill start to drill. Using a full cut. Again, my body is guiding the tool. This left hand is not pulling, but is holding it down on the tool rest. Or I could come in this direction. Now, using a depth drill, we're going to go ahead and drill a center hole. That's a starter hole. Move the tailstock out of the way. And I can tell I need to stop right about near the end of the flute. Bracing my hand. Because it's green wood, it's going to get hot and swell, so you've got to clear the chips frequently, or you won't be able to get it out. That's done. Now I simply move the tool rest in place and start hollowing from the outside to the inside. I've got my flute pointing at about 2 o'clock. Here's the bevel, so you want to angle your handle out so the bevel will go almost straight in. Then you can pivot. Tighten your tool rest. Just speed up just a bit. Now we're going to measure the bowl to get a feel for the diameter. We want about a 10% diameter, so the bowl is approximately 8.5 inches, so we want to go somewhere between 3/4 and 7/8 inches. A little bit less than that. Now, because this edge can be sharp, I'm just going to refine the edge just a little bit, round it over. And having a round edge when it dries will reduce chances of cracking, because that thin wood will crack faster than the little thicker wood. Got to slow down as you approach the middle of the bowl. The miles per hour are certainly slower in the middle than the outside. So give it a chance to cut. And I want a uniform wall, so I'm guiding this down, trying to mimic the outside with the inside. Using my digital calipers, I'll just kind of gauge that, and I'm doing pretty good so far. Now the bottom starts getting rough because you're coming almost directly into end grain. So take your time, sport the tool. Race it with your body. Okay, now that we've got it turned, I marked the species on the bottom with a magic marker or felt tip pen. I put the date on it. If it's a special wood from somebody that I want to try to remember where it came from or who it's going to, I might put their name on it as well. While it's drying, I sometimes use shrink wrap, as I showed in an earlier video, and that works pretty well. Sometimes I use anchor seal. I've got this old peanut butter jar with a brush in the lid. It tends to be a little messier, so sometimes when I'm only doing one, I just tend to use shrink wrap, and that works well. But this works well when you're preserving a lot of green wood for a short period of time. It doesn't last forever, but it will retard the cracking for a bit. Now, the question is, why do we even go this trouble of rough turning it, turning it twice? I'm assuming most of y'all know, but for those that don't, wood is going to move. Wood warps. Here's a sour wood, and it's moved a whole inch. It's 14 inches long ways, the direction the tree was growing, but this way it's 13 inches, and it tends to hump up in the middle. Turning green one time, beginning to end, can give it a nice look and nice effect on some woods, and it's worth trying. But if you want a round bowl, you need to turn it twice. Now, once I either wrap it in shrink wrap or put anchor seal, and I usually just, in this climate here in Georgia, I just put anchor seal on the outside. I don't normally put it on the inside. I'll put it in a bag, a regular green grocery bag, and fold it up. I don't normally put shavings in it. In the Atlanta area, it would tend to mold. In some places, you might want to put shavings in it if it dries too fast in a drier climate, but here it tends to be fairly humid, and putting shavings in it tends to cause fungus or not fungus, but mold. So I'll wrap this up and I'll put it in my garage. I'll take it out of the basement where it's climate controlled, and it'll dry a little too fast and have a tendency to crack. So if I do this, the bag will tend to slow the moisture, kind of keep it in there for a while, and yet allow it to pass through. I may have to change bags if it's real wet every 2-3 days. Put a different bag on it and set the other one aside, and I can reuse that bag. The first 3 or 4 weeks are critical, and I'll leave it out there for at least 4 weeks, and then I might bring it into the shop, but more than likely I'll leave it out there with my collection of rough turn bowls. Hope this has been good for you. Any feedback you got, I appreciate it. If you got any ideas for a particular project, make a comment.